No one ever thinks they'll be the one standing over their child's grave at the age of 5. You don't imagine burying your son before you've even had the chance to watch him grow up. But there I was, staring at Noah's small white casket, the same blue blanket he'd always cuddled with tightly draped over him, his tiny hands folded in peace. A part of me wanted to scream, to ask why life could be so unfair. But I couldn't. Not in front of everyone. Instead, I stood there, trying to keep my composure as the whispers of the people behind me buzzed in my ears like 1,000 tiny daggers. They weren't just mourning Noah. They were whispering about me, judging me. Where was Claire? I could feel their eyes burning into my back. It wasn't enough that my son was gone. Now I had to be the subject of their scrutiny, too. Minutes before stepping into the church, I received a message on my phone from an unknown number. My hand shook as I glanced at it. A photo, clear as day. Claire lounging by a pool in Hawaii, her tanned skin glowing in the sunlight. A man, her lover, had his arm around her. She held a cocktail in her hand, looking carefree. This is where she is today. The message under the photo was simple, chilling. Thought you should see what your wife is really doing today. A concerned friend. For a second I couldn't comprehend it. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my child, was sipping margaritas on a beach while I was here burying our son. I shoved the phone into my pocket, trying to bury the image, but it wouldn't go away. It was taunting me. Her betrayal, her abandonment. The weight of it crushed me, but there was no time for tears, no time for rage. My mother's hand on my arm grounded me, whispering, "Jacob, you're shaking." But I couldn't show weakness. Not now. Not in front of all these people. As the service began, I forced myself to listen to the pastor speak about Noah's love for life. How he never stopped smiling, even during his worst days. I could feel my chest tighten, my hands shaking with anger and pain. Claire wasn't here to hear this. She wasn't here to hear them speak of our son's strength, to see the roses I'd placed on his casket, the ones she had always hated. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just grieving Noah. I was grieving the woman who had abandoned us both when we needed her most. The woman who had turned her back on me, on Noah, for a life of selfish indulgence in Hawaii. But I wouldn't let her get away with it. I wouldn't let her walk away from this unscathed. Not after what she did, not after abandoning us both. The memories of our life together felt like they were being ripped away, piece by piece. As I sat in the church watching the casket being lowered into the ground, I couldn't help but remember the first time I held Noah in my arms. He was so small, so fragile, his tiny fingers curling around mine, as though he could already hold on to the world. I could hear Claire's soft laughter in the background, her eyes full of love as she looked at him. It felt like a lifetime ago, but the pain of those memories was still fresh. I always thought we were a family built on love. We had our struggles, yes, but we worked through them together. I'd always believed that Claire and I were a team. From the moment we found out we were going to be parents, everything shifted. Our world revolved around Noah. His every smile, every giggle, made the sleepless nights worth it. Even in the darkest times, when we watched him struggle to breathe in the hospital room, we clung to the hope that he would get better. Together, we stayed strong, or at least I thought we did. But as I looked back now, through the haze of grief and confusion, I realized that Claire had already started pulling away. I had noticed the signs, the late-night calls she would take in another room, the sudden business trips that always seemed so urgent, the way she started distancing herself from Noah and me. At the time, I chalked it up to stress. It wasn't uncommon for parents to deal with their emotions differently when faced with a child's illness, right? I remember a few weeks ago, just before Noah's condition took a turn for the worse, we sat down for dinner. It was a rare moment of normalcy, a time when we tried to act like everything was fine. Claire had made her famous pasta dish, the one Noah always insisted on eating when he wasn't feeling well. He sat at the table, propped up by pillows, his small face lighting up as he dug into the pasta. I looked at Claire across the table, trying to gauge her. She seemed distant, lost in thought, like she wasn't fully there. But when she looked up at me, her eyes softened, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. That was the last time I truly felt like we were a family. When Noah passed, something in Claire seemed to snap. She was there for the hospital visit, yes, but when it came time for the funeral, she wasn't. It was as if her presence didn't matter anymore, and neither did Noah's memory. Instead, she was in Hawaii, sipping cocktails by the pool with her lover. I couldn't believe it. I still couldn't. How had I missed it? How had I not seen the signs before? It was only when I was holding Noah's hand in the hospital, feeling his tiny pulse slip away, that I realized I had been alone this entire time. I thought Claire was grieving with me. I thought we were both in this together. But when it mattered most, she wasn't there. Not emotionally, not physically. As I stood by the casket, my thoughts kept drifting back to the message I had received just hours earlier. Thought you should see what your wife is really doing today. I couldn't escape the image of Claire laughing under the Hawaiian sun while I buried our son. I had built a life with her. I had trusted her. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been nothing more than a safety net for her, a man to fill the gaps in her life when it was convenient. And once Noah was gone, once she had no more responsibilities, she was free to walk away. The funeral was a blur of well-meaning relatives and neighbors offering their condolences, but every glance felt like a reminder of how alone I really was. My mother, trying to be supportive, had her own doubts about Claire. She never said it outright, but I could tell. And when Diana and Howard, Claire's parents, approached me with their rehearsed lines about how hard this was on her, I could barely keep the rage from boiling over. Diana's soft voice echoed in my mind. You should try to be more understanding. Grief makes people act out of character. She never once acknowledged that Noah had just passed, or that I was, in fact, the one who was hurting most of all. They saw Claire as their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. No matter how badly she had treated me, she was their perfect daughter, and nothing could tarnish that image. It was then that I realized this wasn't just about Claire. This wasn't just about her abandoning me. This was about a system of lies, a network of people who had allowed her to get away with it. It wasn't just her betrayal. It was the betrayal of everyone who had enabled her. And that's when the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. They all knew. They all had their hands in this. Diana, Howard, even the people who claimed to be my friends, all of them had known about Claire's affair. They had watched her betray me and my son, and they had done nothing. Noah was gone, and with him, a piece of my heart. But I wasn't going to let them take everything else from me. Not without a fight. As the funeral reception dragged on, I could barely keep up with the words people were offering me. It all sounded so hollow, so rehearsed. He's in a better place now. No more suffering. They meant well. I knew that. But each phrase made my chest tighten as though I were suffocating. Noah's death wasn't just about letting go of a child. It was about the brutal reality that everything I had trusted, everything I had believed in, was a lie. I didn't want to be there, in that room filled with pitying stares and half-eaten casseroles. It was like a performance, like they were all acting out their roles, offering their sympathy, but never really seeing me, never really understanding what I was going through. I felt like a ghost moving through the room, a mere shadow of the man I used to be. The house felt eerily quiet after the last guest left. I had to leave. I couldn't stay there any longer. The house we had built together, the one that Claire had turned into a house of secrets and lies, was too much for me. I needed to get away, even if just for a few moments. I walked out into the cool evening air, letting the silence fill the space between me and everything I had once known. The pain of losing Noah was unbearable, but the weight of Claire's betrayal, of how she had abandoned us both, was something I couldn't escape. The anger was simmering now, a low boil beneath the surface. I knew the truth, and I couldn't let it go. Claire was never going to get away with this. She had tried to hide behind her lies, pretending that everything was just fine, that she had somehow earned the right to abandon me and our son. But what I saw in that photo, the one of her lounging by a pool in Hawaii, made it clear. She had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The sudden work trips, the late-night phone calls, the distance growing between us. None of it had been about grief. It had been about her own selfish desires, about a life she was building without me, without Noah. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed, not after everything we had been through, not after everything I had lost. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I had been avoiding for days, Mia. She had been the one to send me that photo, the one who had given me the courage to see the truth. I had questions, so many questions, and she seemed to have answers. It was time to find out what Claire had been hiding, to dig into the truth she thought she could bury. "Hello." Mia's voice was soft, hesitant, like she knew I wasn't going to like what she had to say. "Mia, I need to know everything," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "What's really going on with Claire? What have you found out?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "You won't like it, Jacob," she said, her voice laced with something I couldn't place. "But I'll tell you everything. I think it's time you knew the truth." I didn't hesitate. "Meet me tomorrow," I told her. "I'll be ready." The next day, I found myself walking into the small, nondescript coffee shop Mia had suggested. It felt like an ordinary place, the kind Claire would have hated. She was always so particular, always demanding that everything be perfect. She wouldn't have been caught dead in a place like this. But I didn't care. This wasn't about Claire anymore. This was about me, about finding the answers I had been searching for, answers I should have seen sooner. I spotted Mia immediately, sitting at a corner table by the window. She was as unremarkable as the coffee shop, with dark auburn hair pulled into a neat ponytail, her posture rigid as she stirred her coffee. She didn't look up as I approached, and for a moment I hesitated. Was this really the right thing to do? But there was no turning back now. I slid into the chair across from her, the folder containing all the evidence I had gathered thudding onto the table. She glanced up at me then, her green eyes sharp and calculating, before she gave me a small nod. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice steady but low. "I'm here," I replied flatly, crossing my arms. "Now tell me everything." Mia didn't waste time. "Your wife," she began, "has been seeing my ex-boyfriend for over a year. I didn't believe it at first, but then he started showing me proof. Claire's been hiding this from you for months." I froze. The words didn't quite register at first. Claire, my wife, the woman I had shared my life with, had been seeing someone else, and for over a year? How could I have not known? Mia leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. "She's been planning to leave you for him, Jacob. She's been taking money from your life insurance policy. I've seen the texts, the bank transfers. She's going to use that money to start a new life in Hawaii with him. They're buying a house together." I could feel the anger starting to bubble up again, threatening to overwhelm me. "How do you know all this?" I asked, my voice low and tight with fury. Mia smirked. "Because I've been watching her. She thinks she's being clever, but she's been making all these mistakes. I've seen the proof, texts, photos, even a property transfer agreement. They've been using the insurance money to fund their little paradise in Maui." Everything was starting to fall into place. The late-night calls, the sudden trips, the distance between Claire and me. She had been preparing to leave, and I hadn't seen it coming. Mia slid her phone across the table, revealing a series of text messages. From Claire to Brandon, her lover. The words were a punch to the gut. "The payout came through. It's more than enough. We'll be out of here by the end of the month." I read the messages, the weight of each word sinking deeper into my chest. I thought I was going to explode, but instead I stayed still, forcing myself to process what Mia was saying. Claire had been playing me. She thought I was too broken, too distracted by Noah's illness to notice. But now, I was awake. I was angry, yes, but I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The rage that had been simmering for days finally ignited, burning away the grief, leaving me with one clear thought. She was going to pay. The days after meeting Mia blurred together. I could hardly focus on anything beyond the whirlwind of emotions and the plan that was beginning to take shape. The rage, the hurt. It was all there, raw and suffocating. But there was something else now, something harder. I had crossed a line in my mind, and there was no going back. It was one thing to bury my son, to face the gut-wrenching pain of losing Noah. But it was another to realize that the woman I had loved, the woman who had promised to stand by me through the hardest times, had betrayed us both. And she thought she could walk away from it. She thought she could slip away to Hawaii and start a new life with her lover, while I was left to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. But I was done being the victim, done feeling sorry for myself. The anger was fueling me now. Every document, every piece of evidence Mia had given me, every message I read, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. Claire had been planning this escape for far too long, and now it was time to hold her accountable. I spent hours going through the stack of documents Mia had given me. The life insurance policy with Noah's name on it, the bank transfers, the plane tickets to Hawaii. It was all there, clear as day. She had used Noah's death to fund her selfish desires, using the life insurance payout she had secretly taken control of. And I'd been blind to it all, too caught up in my own grief to see the signs. But not anymore. That night, as I stared at the stack of papers, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Claire. Her words were as cold as I'd ever expected them to be, almost mechanical in their tone. "Jacob, I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I didn't mean for it to get this far. Let's fix this." Fix this? The audacity. She thought I'd just forgive her, that I'd welcome her back into my life as if nothing had happened. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just manipulating me. She was manipulating everyone. She'd built her whole life on lies, on deceit, and now she thought she could turn it all around with a few empty words. I stared at the message for a long time, the anger bubbling up once again. I knew what I had to do. I was done playing nice. I wasn't going to be the broken, grieving man she had left behind. I was going to stand up for what was right, for Noah. The next day I met with Marcus again, the lawyer who had helped me build the case. He had been on my side from the start, and now, as I sat across from him, I felt more resolved than ever. We had everything we needed to bring Claire down. The evidence was overwhelming. It wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about her trying to erase our past, our family's legacy, and replace it with lies and manipulation. And I was done letting her get away with it. "We're moving forward," I said to Marcus, my voice steady. "I'm not going to sit back and let her destroy everything. This isn't just about me. It's about what she's done to Noah's memory, what she's taken from him, from us." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "I know, Jacob, and I think it's time we make sure she can't run anymore. We've got her backed into a corner. Let's hit her hard, make her pay for everything." I agreed. It wasn't just about getting revenge anymore. It was about justice. Justice for Noah. Justice for the family. Claire had torn apart without a second thought. She had taken everything from me, from us, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. Later that afternoon, I drove to the realtor's office where the final sale of the house was supposed to take place. I'd already filed an injunction with Marcus's help, but I wanted to be there, to make sure Claire and her family knew I wasn't backing down. This wasn't just about property. It was about showing them that I would fight for everything they thought they could steal. The house was the last piece of what remained of our life together, and I wasn't going to let them take that, too. When I arrived, Claire's car was already parked outside. I took a deep breath and walked inside, the weight of everything I'd learned settling heavily on my shoulders. Claire and her mother, Diana, were seated at the table, their faces covered with fake smiles. But I could see the nervous tension in their eyes. They knew I was coming, and they weren't ready for what I was about to bring. "Jacob," Claire said, her voice dripping with feigned surprise. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I placed the folder of documents down on the table. The thick stack of evidence landed with a heavy thud, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, my voice low, controlled. "It's a record of everything you've done, the forged signatures, the stolen money, the lies." Claire's face went pale, and Diana shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The realtor, who had no idea what was going on, stood awkwardly, clearly regretting his decision to show up that day. "What is this?" Claire asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. "Let me break it down for you," I said, pushing the papers toward her. "This is proof that you've been siphoning money from Noah's life insurance policy. You've been using that money to fund your escape, planning your future with Brandon while I was burying our son. You've been selling this house behind my back, forging my signature, and now you expect me to just walk away? I could feel the anger rising in me again, but I forced it down, keeping my voice steady. "Number, you don't get to do this. Not anymore." Claire's composure faltered for a moment as the truth sank in. Diana opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "You've been complicit in this too. You've enabled her, covered for her, but I'm not going to let you get away with it." I wasn't just talking to Claire anymore. I was talking to everyone who had supported her lies, everyone who had watched her manipulate and destroy our family. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I stood up, not just for myself, but for Noah's memory. "This ends now," I said, my voice firm. The days after the confrontation with Claire were a blur of legal battles, endless paperwork, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about love, about loyalty, and about family. What had I done wrong? Had I missed the signs? How could I have been so blind to Claire's actions, to her betrayal? These were questions I asked myself constantly as I sat alone in Noah's room, staring at his stuffed penguin on the bed, a silent witness to the devastation. But it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the way it shattered everything I had built my life on. My relationship with Claire had been built on trust, on shared dreams, and on the idea that we would always be there for each other, no matter what. We had built a family together, and I had believed in that family. But now I saw it for what it truly was, an illusion, a facade that had crumbled the moment Claire decided to abandon us both. I was consumed with anger, yes, but there was something else too, something deeper, something more painful. I had given everything to this woman, to this family. I had sacrificed my own dreams, my own ambitions, all for the sake of our son, for the sake of the life we were supposed to have together. And now, it felt like all of it had been for nothing. But then, as the days passed and I began to piece everything together, something shifted in me. I realized that I wasn't just grieving the loss of Noah. I was grieving the loss of a life I had imagined with Claire. I had been so focused on holding on to the idea of our family, so desperate to make it work, that I had ignored the cracks that had appeared long before Noah's illness. I remembered the nights we spent in the hospital, the sleepless hours, the whispered conversations in the dark, when Claire would hold my hand and tell me everything would be okay. I remembered the way we would laugh together at Noah's goofy antics, the way she would run after him as he chased the dog in the backyard. Those were the moments that had kept me going, kept me believing that we could get through anything. But those moments were gone now, replaced with betrayal and heartbreak. It was in the midst of this painful realization that I found clarity. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at Claire for what she had done to me or to Noah. It was about finding peace. It was about reclaiming what had been taken from me. Not just the house, not just the money, but my dignity, my sense of self-worth. And it was in that moment, as I sat in Noah's room, surrounded by his favorite toys and drawings, that I understood the true meaning of family. Family wasn't just about blood. It wasn't just about shared memories or the things you build together. It was about loyalty. It was about showing up when it mattered most, about standing by each other through thick and thin, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. And Claire had failed me in that respect. She had failed Noah. But I hadn't failed him, and I wasn't going to let his memory be tarnished by her actions. I stood up from the bed, my fingers brushing over Noah's stuffed penguin, the one he had carried with him everywhere. It felt like he was still there with me, like his spirit was watching over me, reminding me of what truly mattered, the anger, the rage, the desire for revenge. All of that had started to fade away. What mattered now was making sure Noah's memory lived on in a way that honored who he was, who he had been, and the love he had brought into my life. As I walked downstairs, I saw my mother sitting quietly in the living room, her eyes filled with concern, but also with a quiet understanding. She had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, offering support without asking for anything in return. It was her strength, her unwavering belief in me, that had kept me going. I sat down next to her, feeling the weight of everything that had happened finally starting to lift. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You stood up for yourself, for Noah, and for the family you have left." I nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. It wasn't about fighting Claire or her family. It was about protecting the things that mattered most. It was about showing Noah that, even in the face of betrayal, I could still honor him, still carry forward the love he had given me. As I sat there with my mother, I realized that the true meaning of family wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about avoiding mistakes or pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. It was about being there for each other, even when things fell apart. It was about knowing that no matter what happened, the love you shared could never be taken away. And as I looked at the framed photo of Noah on the mantelpiece, smiling up at me with his gap-toothed grin, I knew that he would always be with me. He would always be a part of me, a part of the strength I had found in myself. No matter what Claire had done, no matter how much she had tried to take from me, she could never take that away. I had learned, in the hardest way possible, that love was stronger than betrayal, and that was the lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life. As I stood at the cemetery, the weight of everything that had happened seemed to fall away, replaced by a bittersweet calm. The wind whispered through the trees, and for a brief moment, it felt like Noah was right there with me. The world felt quieter somehow, more peaceful, as if I had reached the end of a long, difficult journey. But the truth was, this was only the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I had fought for what was mine, for what mattered most, and in the end, I had won. The house was safe. The insurance payout had been reallocated to a cause far more important than anything Claire and her family had ever planned. The Noah Thompson Foundation would carry on his legacy, funding pediatric cancer research and supporting families who faced the same heartache we had. It wasn't just about money. It was about turning my grief into something that could help others, something that could keep Noah's memory alive, even after everything we had lost. I placed the stuffed penguin at the base of Noah's headstone, a symbol of his innocent joy, his playful spirit, the same penguin he had carried everywhere, the same one that still felt so close to him. As I stood there, I promised him again that I would keep fighting, that I would never let his memory be tainted by betrayal, or forgotten by those who had tried to exploit our pain. I looked up to see my father walking toward me, his steps slow but steady. His memory had slipped away over the years, but in this moment, his eyes were clear. "He's at peace now," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I hope so, Dad." We stood there in silence, our grief mingling with the wind, a quiet understanding between us. And as I turned to walk away, I felt a sense of closure. Not the kind of closure that erases the past, but the kind that allows you to live with it. The kind that lets you move forward, carrying the memory of those you've lost, without letting the pain hold you back. Life had a way of breaking us down, of testing our limits, but it also had a way of rebuilding us, stronger and more resilient. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about surviving, about honoring the love and memories we had left, and about protecting what mattered most. Noah was gone, but his legacy lived on. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like that was enough. As we walked back to the car, my father reached for my hand, his grip weak but reassuring. "Pancakes?" he asked with a soft smile. I laughed, the sound barely audible through the lump in my throat. "Yeah, Dad, pancakes." We drove home in silence, but it was a peaceful silence, a silence that told me everything I needed to know. The past was behind me, and while the scars of betrayal would never fully fade, I had learned to live with them. I had learned to let go. And as I glanced back one last time, I couldn't help but feel that Noah was watching over us. His spirit, his love, his resilience. It was all still there, in the memories, in the foundation I had built in his name. What would you do if you found yourself standing at a crossroads, forced to let go of everything you thought was real? Would you crumble under the weight of betrayal? Or would you find the strength to rise again? Sometimes, the most difficult journey is the one you take within yourself.